The search for Flight 305's hijacker was never just about a crime. It was a desperate race against the raw, unforgiving wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Thousands of men, helicopters, and maps were deployed into a landscape that seemed to swallow every trace. But beneath the gray skies and the dense, misty canopy, the search yielded only one thing: silence. The man known as D.B. Cooper hadn't just escaped. He had stepped into a void, leaving investigators with the haunting realization that nature itself had become the final guardian of his secrets. If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. What really happened? Because every case you are about to hear has one thing in common. The investigation was closed. The file was sealed. And the truth was never found. These are the cases that detectives couldn't solve, that witnesses couldn't explain, and that official records couldn't account for. If you are someone who needs to know what really happened, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Unsolved Vault and join thousands of investigators uncovering the case's history left unfinished. Welcome back. This is Unsolved Vault. And today, we open a case that was never meant to stay closed. Morning arrived over the Pacific Northwest with low clouds hanging above forests, rivers, and mountain valleys. Search aircraft prepared for takeoff while teams on the ground gathered maps and equipment. Vast stretches of Washington wilderness spread beneath the gray sky, interrupted only by narrow roads and isolated communities. Investigators believed somewhere within that landscape lay evidence connected to the man who had vanished from Flight 305. Yet the region itself appeared immense and unforgiving. Trees covered hillsides in every direction, and nature offered few obvious places to begin. The search unfolded beneath the sounds of helicopters, engines, and voices carried across damp air. Rain from the previous night had left the ground soft in some places and difficult in others. Rivers moved through valleys hidden beneath mist while cold winds swept across open spaces. Investigators experienced a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. Every footprint, broken branch, or unusual object seemed worthy of attention. The wilderness itself created an atmosphere filled with possibility. Somewhere inside those sounds and sensations, people searched for signs that might reveal what had happened in the darkness. As daylight spread across the region, teams moved outward in different directions. Pilots studied likely areas from above, while investigators examined roads and remote locations below. Reports and theories changed as new information arrived. Search patterns shifted according to weather conditions and estimates about where Cooper might have landed. Expectations remained high during those first hours. Many believed evidence would appear quickly. Yet with each passing day, confidence slowly gave way to questions. The landscape offered distance and complexity rather than easy answers, forcing investigators to adapt their efforts again and again. Perhaps that is what makes this chapter feel so unusual. Mysteries often promise discoveries, but here the search revealed mostly absence. People entered forests expecting traces left behind by a man carrying money and parachutes. Instead, they encountered silence spread across rivers and mountains. Looking back decades later, those missing footprints feel almost symbolic. Nature had witnessed something important, yet it offered no explanation. The search had begun with urgency and confidence, but beneath the clouds of the Pacific Northwest, certainty seemed to disappear as completely as the man they were trying to find. In the days following the hijacking, investigators worked with one question that seemed simple at first. Where had D.B. Cooper landed? The answer depended on estimates drawn from flight records, weather conditions, and the timing of unusual movements detected aboard Flight 305. Yet those estimates pointed toward an enormous area stretching across forests and rivers in southwestern Washington. The region offered very few clues. Mountains, hills, and isolated roads complicated every calculation. What looked manageable on maps quickly became overwhelming when viewed from the ground. The search had entered a landscape that seemed determined to resist certainty. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft scanned likely locations from above. Search crews traveled through rough terrain carrying equipment and maps, while local authorities assisted with reports from residents. Investigators hoped someone might discover a parachute hanging in trees or bags of money hidden near a riverbank. Every unusual object received attention. Broken branches and footprints attracted interest before proving unrelated. Hunters and hikers became unexpected participants in the search. Many people believed evidence would appear sooner or later. The idea that a man carrying $200,000 could disappear completely seemed difficult to accept. Weather complicated everything. Rain had passed through the area during the night of the jump, and cold temperatures shaped conditions on the ground. Rivers moved swiftly through valleys surrounded by thick vegetation. Fallen leaves covered trails and open spaces. In many places, visibility remained poor even during daylight. Search teams discovered that nature could hide objects with remarkable efficiency. A parachute or backpack might rest only a short distance away and still escape notice. The deeper investigators entered the wilderness, the more they understood how easily evidence could vanish beneath forests and changing seasons. Public interest grew alongside the official search. Newspapers followed developments closely, and stories about the mysterious hijacker spread across the country. People living near the estimated jump zone examined their own surroundings with fresh curiosity. Reports arrived from individuals convinced they had found clues or seen suspicious strangers. Most leads ended in disappointment, but hope encouraged continued efforts. The mystery inspired ordinary citizens to look more carefully at places they had known for years. Fields, roads, and riverbanks suddenly carried the possibility of hidden answers waiting beneath familiar landscapes. Weeks passed, yet the search produced almost nothing of significance. No body appeared. No parachutes emerged from the forests. No bags of money surfaced along roads or streams. Investigators faced an unsettling reality. The Pacific Northwest had absorbed the mystery with extraordinary silence. Each empty search area deepened the questions surrounding Cooper's fate. Had he escaped successfully, or had nature concealed the truth forever? The absence of evidence became evidence itself, creating a strange feeling that the wilderness had accepted its role as the final guardian of whatever happened after the jump into darkness. As the first weeks turned into months, the nature of the search quietly changed. The urgency that marked those early days began to give way to patience and persistence. Investigators no longer expected dramatic discoveries waiting behind the next hill or beneath the next tree. Instead, they settled into a slower process shaped by reports, calculations, and repeated examinations of possible landing areas. Maps covered office walls. Flight paths were reviewed again and again. What had begun as a race against time slowly transformed into a careful effort to understand a landscape that seemed unwilling to surrender even the smallest clue. Search teams returned to many of the same places under different conditions. Seasons changed the appearance of forests and riverbanks. Snow arrived in some areas, followed by spring growth that altered the terrain once again. Helicopters revisited valleys while investigators followed new theories about wind patterns and jump locations. Every adjustment brought fresh hope, but the results remained frustratingly familiar. Branches, animal tracks, and forgotten objects appeared where evidence was expected. Nature continued to offer distractions rather than answers. The missing man remained hidden behind possibilities that shifted with time and weather. Residents living near the estimated search zones became part of the mystery in unexpected ways. Farmers, hunters, fishermen, and hikers learned to pay closer attention to their surroundings. Some reported strange objects found in remote places. Others remembered hearing aircraft or noticing unusual conditions during the night of the hijacking. Local conversations often returned to the same question. Had Cooper passed through these forests after reaching the ground? Stories traveled between neighbors and communities, growing with each retelling. The mystery became woven into the identity of certain places, transforming ordinary landscapes into locations connected to legend. Investigators faced another challenge that received less attention. Human memory changed with time. Witnesses reconsidered details. Reports evolved. People sometimes confused personal recollections with stories they had read in newspapers. A promising lead could appear convincing one month and collapse the next. The absence of physical evidence forced investigators to rely heavily on information that shifted over the years. That uncertainty created endless complications. Without footprints, equipment, or reliable sightings, theories multiplied faster than answers. Each possibility opened new directions while simultaneously pushing certainty further away. Perhaps the most remarkable detail was not what search teams discovered, but what they failed to discover. A man carrying money and parachutes had vanished into one of the most heavily searched mysteries in American history. Yet forests, rivers, and mountains offered almost nothing in return. Decades later, people still return to those maps and landscapes with curiosity. The missing footprints became symbols of something larger. Nature had not erased the mystery. Instead, it had preserved it by refusing to reveal enough, leaving behind questions that continued to wander through the Pacific Northwest long after the search itself had faded. Years passed, but the search never truly ended. It simply changed form. Large-scale operations gave way to quieter efforts carried out by investigators, historians, and ordinary people fascinated by the mystery. New generations studied old maps and examined forgotten reports. Hikers explored remote trails with curiosity rather than official orders. Hunters crossing isolated valleys sometimes wondered whether something important rested beneath the soil nearby. The Pacific Northwest had become more than a location. It had transformed into a landscape connected to unanswered questions, where almost any discovery carried the possibility of changing history. From time to time, unusual reports revived hopes that the mystery might finally yield something tangible. Pieces of fabric, abandoned parachutes, and scattered objects found in forests drew attention before proving unrelated. Newspapers occasionally highlighted these discoveries, only for excitement to fade once investigators completed their examinations. Each false lead followed a familiar pattern. Curiosity grew quickly, theories appeared, and disappointment quietly followed. Yet even disappointment carried its own strange effect. Instead of weakening interest, it seemed to strengthen the mystery itself. Every dead end reminded people how completely Cooper had disappeared. Perhaps the most famous surprise arrived years later, not in a mountain valley or hidden forest, but along the banks of the Columbia River. In 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram uncovered bundles of deteriorating $20 bills while digging in the sand near Tenabar. The serial numbers matched the ransom money from Flight 305. For the first time in nearly a decade, investigators held physical evidence recovered from the world outside the aircraft. Yet even this discovery created new questions rather than answers. Nobody could explain with certainty how the money had reached that location. The discovery at Tenabar changed the emotional tone surrounding the case. Until then, the mystery had been defined largely by absence. Now there was something real that connected the man known as D.B. Cooper to the landscape itself. Still, the evidence remained incomplete. Most of the ransom money had vanished. No parachute appeared beside the river. No footprints or personal belongings accompanied the bills. Once again, nature revealed only fragments. It felt almost as though the land itself preferred suggestions over explanations, offering enough to sustain curiosity while keeping deeper secrets hidden beneath silence. Looking back, the missing footprints tell a story beyond simple failure. Search teams crossed valleys and forests, expecting traces left behind by a man who had entered the night carrying money and parachutes. Instead, they encountered a mystery shaped by absence. The wilderness gave investigators almost nothing, yet that emptiness became part of the legend. Decades later, people continue searching not because evidence is abundant, but because it is so rare. Somewhere between rivers and mountains, unanswered questions settled into the landscape itself, waiting quietly beneath trees, mist, and the endless curiosity of those who still wonder what truly happened. But if the forest offered nothing but silence, the cabin of Flight 305 began to speak. As investigators combed through the empty aircraft, they found the only physical remnants left behind by the ghost of the skies. When investigators entered the empty cabin of Flight 305, they found more than vacant seats and abandoned trays. Scattered among ordinary surroundings were small objects connected to the man who had disappeared into the night. A black clip-on tie remained behind, along with its tie clasp. Fingerprints had been collected from certain surfaces. Cigarette butts also rested inside ashtrays used during the flight. None of these items appeared extraordinary by themselves. Yet together they formed a strange collection of physical traces left behind by someone whose identity remained unknown. The atmosphere inside the aircraft carried a different feeling after the mystery had moved elsewhere. The smell of tobacco still lingered in the cabin. Soft lights illuminated empty seats where passengers had spent the evening. Investigators experienced the quiet sounds of people searching through ordinary spaces with unusual care. Every object attracted attention. Every surface seemed worthy of examination. The cabin no longer felt like a commercial airliner. It had become something closer to a silent room filled with questions. Even the smallest details appeared to carry the possibility of hidden answers. As evidence collection began, simple objects acquired new importance. Investigators photographed items and preserved materials that might reveal something about the missing passenger. Fingerprints were lifted. Personal belongings were cataloged. Items that crew members had barely noticed hours earlier suddenly became pieces of a puzzle nobody understood. What seemed unimportant during the flight gained significance through absence. With the man himself gone, attention shifted naturally toward whatever remained behind. The mystery had changed direction. Instead of searching the sky, investigators began listening to objects that could not speak. Perhaps that is what makes these clues feel so fascinating decades later. They represent the final physical connection between history and the unknown man who called himself Dan Cooper. A tie, cigarette remnants, and scattered traces survived where certainty disappeared. Looking back, those objects almost resemble silent witnesses trapped between memory and evidence. They could reveal details, but never intentions. They could confirm presence, but not identity. In a mystery defined by disappearance, the things left behind became strangely important, carrying questions that investigators would continue asking long after the aircraft itself returned to ordinary service. In the hours after Flight 305 landed in Reno, investigators moved through the cabin with careful attention. The mystery had already shifted from an active hijacking to something more elusive. The man known as D.B. Cooper had vanished, leaving behind only traces of his presence. Every object inside the aircraft suddenly carried importance. Seats, tray tables, armrests, and ashtrays became sources of possible information. Investigators understood that the smallest detail might provide the key to understanding the stranger who had disappeared into the darkness. Yet even at that early stage, uncertainty surrounded nearly everything they touched. Among the objects discovered, one item would later attract extraordinary attention. Cooper had left behind a black clip-on tie, along with a mother-of-pearl tie clasp. At first, the tie appeared ordinary. Thousands of men wore similar clothing during the early 1970s. Yet unlike memories and witness descriptions, the tie represented something physical. It had belonged to the man himself. Investigators preserved it carefully, though few could imagine how important that simple accessory would become decades later. Hidden within its fabric rested possibilities no one fully understood at the time. Cigarette butts offered another potential source of answers. Witnesses remembered Cooper smoking throughout the flight, and several cigarette remnants had been collected after the aircraft landed. For a time, investigators hoped they might reveal valuable information. Unfortunately, those cigarette butts disappeared years later and were never preserved with the care modern investigators might have preferred. Their loss became one of the most frustrating details in the entire case. In later decades, advances in DNA technology would make such evidence incredibly valuable. Yet by then, those small pieces of the mystery had vanished almost as completely as Cooper himself. Fingerprints created additional complications. Investigators recovered numerous prints from the aircraft, but determining which belonged to Cooper proved difficult. Hundreds of passengers and crew members had used the plane before and after the hijacking. Sorting meaningful evidence from ordinary contact became a challenge. Some prints attracted attention, while others produced confusion. Over time, questions emerged about which fingerprints truly belonged to the hijacker. Even evidence that appeared straightforward carried uncertainty. The closer investigators examined the physical traces, the more they discovered how difficult it could be to separate the mysterious passenger from the countless people who had shared the aircraft. Perhaps that is what made the evidence so intriguing. None of it seemed dramatic. A tie, fingerprints, cigarette remnants, and ordinary surfaces became silent witnesses to an extraordinary event. Yet witnesses can only reveal what they have experienced. These objects confirmed that a man had occupied seat 18C. They proved he had smoked, dressed carefully, and touched certain parts of the cabin. Beyond that, they offered little certainty. Their silence became part of the mystery, inviting generations of investigators to search for answers hidden inside details too quiet to explain themselves. As years passed, the evidence left behind by D.B. Cooper began to acquire a different kind of importance. Advances in science transformed ordinary objects into sources of new possibilities. Investigators and forensic specialists returned to the black clip-on tie with renewed interest. What once seemed like a simple accessory became something far more intriguing. Microscopic particles trapped within its fibers revealed traces of metals and industrial materials. Researchers believed these particles might reflect the environment in which Cooper had worked. Suddenly, an object overlooked for decades started offering quiet hints about a life nobody had ever truly known. The tie itself inspired endless questions. Some experts noticed unusual particles linked to titanium and other materials used in certain industries during the 1960s and 70s. Those discoveries encouraged speculation about engineering, aerospace manufacturing, and technical professions. Yet certainty remained frustratingly distant. Industrial environments varied widely, and particles could arrive through unexpected means. The evidence pointed toward possibilities rather than conclusions. Like so many details in the case, the tie revealed enough to create theories while withholding the answers investigators most wanted. It behaved almost like a witness speaking through whispers instead of clear statements. Fingerprints continued to create similar challenges. Over the years, investigators re-evaluated which prints truly belonged to Cooper. Some sets attracted attention before losing importance. Others remained mysterious because their origins could not be confirmed with confidence. The passage of time complicated matters further. Procedures used during the early 1970s differed from modern standards. Records changed hands. Questions emerged about contamination and incomplete documentation. The evidence itself had survived, but the circumstances surrounding its collection introduced uncertainty. Even physical traces proved vulnerable to confusion and changing interpretations. One absence proved especially painful for investigators. The missing cigarette butts represented opportunities that disappeared before technology could fully exploit them. Had they survived, DNA analysis might have provided remarkable insights. Instead, they joined the long list of vanished clues surrounding the mystery. Their loss created a strange irony. A man who vanished into darkness had left behind objects that later disappeared as well. It almost felt as though the case resisted complete understanding, allowing only fragments to remain available for future generations. Despite these frustrations, the evidence continued to inspire curiosity. The tie resting in storage, the disputed fingerprints, and the stories surrounding missing cigarette remnants became part of the larger mystery. None of these clues solved the case, but each preserved a connection to the unknown man. Investigators could not speak with Cooper, but they could study the objects that had once traveled with him. In that sense, the clues left behind became quiet messengers from another time, carrying fragments of a story that refused to reveal its ending. Decades after the hijacking, the evidence left behind inside Flight 305 continued to occupy shelves, laboratories, and the thoughts of investigators who refused to let the mystery fade. Unlike memories that changed with time, these objects endured. The black tie remained preserved. Fingerprints and photographs survived in files. Reports describing missing cigarette butts became part of the record. Each item represented a moment frozen in November of 1971. Yet none of them provided the simple answer everyone sought. They preserved presence without revealing identity, creating a strange balance between certainty and mystery. Researchers studying the tie discovered something fascinating. Tiny particles trapped within the fabric suggested contact with industrial materials uncommon to ordinary office environments. Some believed these traces hinted at aerospace work or specialized manufacturing. Others urged caution, reminding people that evidence often carries more than one explanation. A single object could suggest possibilities without proving them. The mystery encouraged careful thinking because assumptions had misled investigators many times before. Even scientific discoveries required humility. The clues whispered, but they never spoke loudly enough to remove doubt completely. There is something remarkable about how ordinary possessions become historical artifacts. A clip-on tie purchased without much thought became one of the most studied items in criminal history. Simple cigarette remnants, now lost forever, inspired endless regret among investigators who understood what modern science might have achieved. Fingerprints collected inside the aircraft created debates that stretched across generations. None of these objects were valuable when Cooper carried them aboard Flight 305. Their importance emerged only after disappearance transformed them into connections with someone nobody could find. Perhaps that is why these clues feel strangely personal. They represent the final things Cooper touched before stepping beyond certainty. His face disappeared into legend, but his belongings remained behind like quiet echoes. People often imagine mysteries as grand puzzles built around dramatic discoveries. Yet this story reveals something different. Sometimes history survives through ordinary objects resting in storage boxes and evidence rooms. A tie, a clasp, and traces collected from an airplane cabin continue to invite questions long after the voices of witnesses have faded. They cannot tell investigators who D.B. Cooper truly was. Still, they preserve something equally powerful. They remind us that a real person once occupied seat 18C, and somewhere between those forgotten objects and the empty sky, the answers quietly slipped away. Yet, these objects could only offer clues, not an identity. As the physical trail grew cold, the vacuum was filled by the faces of those who could have been him. As the years passed, photographs, sketches, and case files filled desks and evidence rooms across America. Names attached themselves to the mystery with surprising regularity. Some belonged to former soldiers with parachute experience. Others came from career criminals, engineers, pilots, and ordinary men whose faces resembled the famous composite drawing. Investigators examined each possibility with care. Newspapers often presented these individuals as promising answers. Yet behind every name stood another layer of uncertainty. The growing list of suspects eventually became almost as famous as the mysterious man they hoped to identify. The atmosphere surrounding these theories carried a strange mixture of excitement and disappointment. Reporters chased rumors while families recognized faces from old photographs and wondered about forgotten relatives. Telephones rang with tips from strangers convinced they possessed hidden knowledge. Conversations about D.B. Cooper moved through homes, police stations, and television programs. Every new suspect created fresh speculation. Hope often arrived quietly, accompanied by newspaper headlines and whispered stories. Yet certainty remained difficult to grasp, leaving behind a feeling that answers always stood just beyond reach. Over time, attention shifted from one individual to another. Investigators pursued leads, compared fingerprints, and examined personal histories. Sometimes a suspect seemed convincing for months before evidence weakened the theory. New witnesses emerged while old assumptions faded. Books and documentaries introduced different names, each supported by intriguing details and unanswered questions. The mystery itself adapted with changing generations. Men once ignored suddenly attracted interest, while others disappeared from discussion. Like shadows moving across old photographs, identities appeared briefly and then drifted away again without providing the certainty everyone wanted. Perhaps that endless cycle reveals something unusual about the case itself. People searching for D.B. Cooper often discover stories larger than the mystery. Behind every suspect rests another human life filled with memories, secrets, and contradictions. Looking back decades later, the search feels less like a straight path and more like a hallway lined with forgotten doors. Some open briefly before closing again. Others remain locked. Somewhere beyond those names and rumors stands the truth, hidden behind possibilities that continue to invite curiosity without ever fully surrendering their secrets. In the years following the hijacking, the FBI received thousands of tips from across the United States and beyond. Some came from concerned citizens who recognized similarities between friends, relatives, or former co-workers and the famous sketches of D.B. Cooper. Others arrived from people convinced they possessed information hidden from investigators. Every lead, no matter how unusual, had to be considered. Names accumulated inside files and reports. Some suspects carried criminal histories. Others had military experience or knowledge of aircraft. Yet most shared one thing in common. Their stories seemed promising until closer examination revealed questions nobody could answer. Among the earliest theories were men whose backgrounds appeared almost too perfect. Former paratroopers, engineers, and aviation enthusiasts naturally attracted attention because the hijacking itself suggested planning and technical knowledge. Investigators compared physical descriptions and personal histories while searching for connections to the Pacific Northwest. In several cases, friends and family members provided stories that sounded remarkably convincing. Certain suspects resembled composite sketches. Some had vanished from ordinary life for periods of time. Others possessed unusual skills or habits. Yet similarities alone rarely produced certainty. The deeper investigators looked, the more complicated each story became. Media attention added another layer to the mystery. Newspapers and television programs often introduced suspects with dramatic headlines, creating waves of excitement among the public. Books later expanded those theories, presenting arguments supported by photographs, personal memories, and fragments of evidence. Readers found themselves drawn into stories involving quiet businessmen, former soldiers, and mysterious strangers. Some theories survived for decades, while others faded quickly. Each new claim promised answers. Yet the mystery possessed an unusual ability to resist conclusions. Just when one suspect appeared convincing, another unanswered detail emerged and reopened old questions. Families sometimes found themselves living beneath unexpected suspicion. Sons remembered fathers who seemed strangely secretive. Wives recalled unusual conversations or unexplained absences. Brothers and friends shared memories they had once ignored. In some cases, those memories inspired years of investigation and public attention. Yet memory itself proved unreliable. Stories changed with time. Personal beliefs influenced recollections. What appeared significant decades later might have seemed meaningless in 1971. Investigators understood this problem well. Human memory offered possibilities, but it rarely provided proof strong enough to settle the mystery. Perhaps the most curious aspect of the endless suspects was what they revealed about human nature. People wanted the mystery to belong to someone familiar, someone whose story could finally explain the unknown. Yet every promising name carried contradictions alongside similarities. The result was a growing collection of vanished identities and unfinished stories. Men stepped briefly into the spotlight before fading back into uncertainty. The mystery moved forward, but certainty remained distant. D.B. Cooper seemed to hide behind other lives, allowing names and rumors to gather around him while his own identity continued to drift somewhere beyond reach. Among the many names connected to the mystery, a few attracted unusual attention and refused to disappear completely. Their stories carried details that seemed almost too fitting. Some possessed military training and parachute experience. Others had backgrounds connected to aviation or engineering. A few even resembled the famous sketches in ways that startled investigators and journalists alike. Yet every promising theory eventually encountered obstacles. Fingerprints failed to match. Timelines created problems. Witness descriptions conflicted with known facts. The closer people looked, the more uncertainty appeared. Each suspect seemed to hold part of the story while withholding the answer itself. One man might capture public imagination for years before another theory quietly replaced him. Books and documentaries often revived forgotten names, presenting evidence through fresh perspectives. Authors examined photographs, interviews, and personal histories with remarkable dedication. Some families came forward believing they recognized hidden truths in the behavior of fathers or relatives. Others rejected those theories completely. Arguments developed between supporters and critics, creating debates that stretched across generations. In many ways, the mystery expanded beyond the original hijacking. It became a collection of competing stories, each searching for the same missing identity. The passage of time added another challenge. Many suspects aged and died before questions surrounding them could be resolved. Memories faded. Witnesses disappeared. Documents were lost or scattered across archives. New technologies brought fresh opportunities, but they also highlighted mistakes and limitations from earlier decades. Investigators revisited old evidence, hoping modern science might reveal something overlooked. Sometimes new information strengthened existing theories. At other times, long-accepted ideas quietly collapsed. The mystery evolved with every generation, adapting to changing methods while preserving the same unanswered question that had existed since 1971. Rumors played their own strange role. Stories emerged about secret confessions made on deathbeds or mysterious remarks shared among friends. Some people claimed Cooper survived and lived quietly under another name. Others believed he perished soon after leaving the aircraft. Certain rumors sounded believable because they touched emotions rather than evidence. They offered endings that felt satisfying, even when proof remained absent. Investigators learned to approach such stories carefully. Fascinating details often dissolved under closer examination. Yet rumors persisted because they filled spaces left empty by facts, creating possibilities where certainty had failed. Perhaps that endless parade of suspects reveals something deeper about the mystery itself. People searching for D.B. Cooper rarely discover one answer. Instead, they encounter dozens of lives filled with secrets, regrets, and unanswered questions. Every suspect represents another doorway leading toward possibility. Some paths end quickly. Others continue for decades. Yet none have delivered the final truth. The result is a strange landscape populated by forgotten names and half-remembered stories. Somewhere beyond them stands the real man who boarded Flight 305, hidden behind a crowd of identities that appeared briefly and then vanished once again. As decades passed, something curious happened to the mystery of D.B. Cooper. The search for one man slowly transformed into a collection of stories about many men. Investigators, writers, and amateur researchers built entire lifetimes of work around individual suspects. Some became deeply convinced they had found the answer. Others spent years proving why certain theories could not be true. Names rose into public attention and then faded away, replaced by fresh candidates carrying familiar promises. Yet despite thousands of pages, interviews, and debates, the central mystery remained untouched. The real identity behind the famous alias continued to stand just beyond reach. What made these stories fascinating was not simply the evidence, but the people attached to it. Former soldiers carried memories of war. Quiet fathers hid secrets from families. Engineers and adventurers left behind photographs and unanswered questions. Some suspects lived ordinary lives and never imagined their names would become connected to one of America's greatest mysteries. Others welcomed the attention, while a few denied everything until the end of their lives. Behind every theory stood real people with complicated histories. The search for D.B. Cooper often became a journey through forgotten lives rather than a straightforward investigation. The mystery also revealed how easily certainty can slip away when time enters the story. Witnesses changed their memories. Documents disappeared. Families disagreed about events remembered differently. New technologies provided fresh insights, yet they rarely delivered complete answers. Instead, they illuminated small pieces while leaving larger questions untouched. Historians and investigators discovered that evidence rarely speaks with one voice. It whispers through fragments, photographs, and personal recollections shaped by years of distance. The truth may still exist somewhere, but reaching it becomes harder with each passing decade. Perhaps that is why the endless suspects never truly diminish the mystery. In some strange way, they deepen it. Every failed theory reminds us how difficult it is to understand another person's life completely. Somewhere among thousands of names and rumors, one ordinary man boarded Flight 305 and disappeared into history. Whether he survived or perished remains unknown. His face became famous, but his identity dissolved into possibility. The stories surrounding him continue to multiply because the silence at the center of the mystery remains unbroken. And perhaps that silence itself has become the final disguise, allowing D.B. Cooper to vanish again and again, even as generations continue searching for the man hidden behind the name. And just as the suspects faded into the background, the man behind the alias ascended into something far more powerful than a criminal record. Long after the investigation faded from headlines, the image of D.B. Cooper found new life beyond police files and evidence rooms. Books appeared on store shelves. Television programs revisited old theories. Artists, writers, and filmmakers introduced the mysterious figure to new generations. His composite sketch became instantly recognizable, almost detached from the real man who boarded Flight 305. What began as a hijacking gradually transformed into something larger. The story moved beyond the boundaries of criminal history and entered American culture, where legends often survive long after facts begin to fade. People encountered the mystery through many different experiences. Some first heard about Cooper through documentaries playing late at night. Others discovered his story through magazines, podcasts, or conversations with friends fascinated by unsolved cases. The mystery carried a particular atmosphere that seemed to invite curiosity. Rainy forests, missing money, and an unidentified man disappearing into darkness created images that lingered in the imagination. Even decades later, those elements continued to inspire wonder. The case felt less like a closed chapter and more like a question waiting quietly beneath familiar stories. As generations changed, the story itself evolved. New books introduced forgotten details while filmmakers explored different interpretations. Strange discoveries occasionally returned the mystery to public attention. Amateur investigators shared theories across the internet, bringing fresh voices into conversations once limited to agents and reporters. Each era shaped the legend in different ways. What once belonged to newspapers and television expanded into digital communities and documentaries. The mystery adapted naturally, finding new audiences without losing the quiet fascination that had surrounded it from the beginning. Perhaps that enduring fascination reveals something deeper than the identity of one missing man. Some mysteries survive because they offer answers. Others survive because they leave space for imagination. Looking back now, D.B. Cooper feels suspended somewhere between history and folklore. The evidence remains real, yet the story carries the atmosphere of an old legend whispered across generations. That balance gives the mystery unusual power. Even after decades of investigation and endless speculation, the man behind the name continues to stand just beyond certainty, inviting curiosity without ever fully revealing himself. As the years passed, the mystery of D.B. Cooper slowly escaped the boundaries of the original investigation. What had once been a case studied by agents and witnesses became something shared through books, radio programs, and documentaries. Writers revisited the story with fresh curiosity, often focusing on details that earlier generations had overlooked. Each retelling added new layers to the legend. Readers encountered the image of a calm man in a dark suit who disappeared into the night carrying ransom money. That image possessed a strange power. It felt both historical and strangely timeless. Hollywood and television also discovered the appeal of the mystery. Fictional characters borrowed pieces of Cooper's story. Films and series referenced the unknown hijacker in subtle ways, sometimes portraying him as an outlaw and sometimes as a clever escape artist. Songs, novels, and comic books found inspiration in the unanswered questions surrounding the case. Unlike many criminals remembered through violence, Cooper entered popular culture through mystery and absence. People rarely focused on fear. Instead, they became fascinated by the possibility that one man had stepped into darkness and somehow avoided explanation. The rise of the internet gave the story another life. Online forums and discussion groups allowed strangers from around the world to exchange theories and compare evidence. Amateur researchers studied maps and weather reports with remarkable dedication. Some focused on overlooked suspects. Others searched for hidden meanings inside old documents and witness statements. Photographs and interviews once buried in archives reached entirely new audiences. The mystery no longer belonged only to historians or retired investigators. It became a shared puzzle explored by thousands of curious minds connected through digital communities. Certain discoveries helped keep public interest alive. The money found along the Columbia River in 1980 reminded people that the case still contained secrets. New forensic examinations of the tie created fresh headlines decades after the hijacking. Each development revived old questions rather than resolving them. Journalists returned to the story because uncertainty itself remained compelling. Readers and viewers recognized something unusual in the case. Time had not weakened its appeal. If anything, the passing decades seemed to deepen the fascination. The absence of answers encouraged people to continue searching. Perhaps that enduring curiosity reveals something unusual about human nature. People are drawn to mysteries that leave room for imagination. D.B. Cooper became more than a suspect or a case number. He transformed into a symbol of unanswered questions. Every generation rediscovered the story and interpreted it through its own perspective. Yet beneath books, films, and endless theories, one fact remained unchanged. A man boarded Flight 305 under the name Dan Cooper and disappeared into history. Everything that followed became part of a legend that refused to surrender its secrets, no matter how much time passed. What makes the legend of D.B. Cooper unusual is the way it balances between fact and imagination. Most famous criminal cases eventually move toward resolution. An arrest is made, a confession appears, or evidence closes the remaining gaps. The Cooper mystery followed a different path. The facts remained surprisingly clear up to a certain point. Investigators knew who boarded the plane. They knew what he demanded. They knew when the aircraft left Seattle and when it landed in Reno. Then the story reached a boundary where certainty ended. Beyond that point, imagination quietly entered the space left behind. People began filling that space in different ways. Some imagined Cooper as a skilled professional who planned every detail and escaped successfully. Others believed he underestimated the dangers of the jump and never survived the night. Between those extremes existed countless variations. Each theory reflected not only evidence, but also personal beliefs about risk, intelligence, and human nature. The mystery became a mirror that revealed as much about the people discussing it as it did about the unknown man himself. That quality helped the story survive long after many other unsolved cases faded from public attention. Communities in the Pacific Northwest gradually embraced their connection to the legend. Events, discussions, and local traditions emerged around the mystery. Certain locations became linked to the story through rumor, history, or simple proximity. Visitors arrived hoping to stand near places associated with the famous hijacking. Small towns discovered that the mystery carried a cultural life of its own. It existed not only in archives and evidence files, but also in conversations shared between generations. The story had become part of the landscape, woven into forests, rivers, and memories across the region. Historians often find themselves in an unusual position when examining the case. They possess enough information to understand the outline of events, yet not enough to explain the ending. That balance creates a lasting sense of curiosity. New technologies occasionally promise breakthroughs, and fresh theories continue to appear. Yet every effort eventually encounters the same silent barrier. The central mystery remains untouched. The unknown man behind the alias continues to stand just beyond the reach of certainty, preserving the tension that has kept the story alive for decades. Perhaps that is why the legend feels different from ordinary folklore. It is rooted in real events, documented evidence, and living memories. At the same time, it carries the atmosphere of a modern myth. Somewhere between those two worlds, D.B. Cooper continues to travel through American culture, not as a solved case, and not as pure fiction, but as something in between. The unanswered ending grants the story a strange durability. It survives because the final chapter was never written, leaving generations free to imagine what happened after the darkness closed around Flight 305. More than half a century after the events aboard Flight 305, the mystery continues to occupy a quiet place in American memory. The FBI officially closed active investigations in 2016, yet curiosity refused to follow. Retired agents still speak about the case. Historians revisit old documents. Amateur researchers continue comparing maps, photographs, and witness statements with remarkable patience. The story has survived changes in technology and generations of audiences. Few mysteries maintain that kind of endurance. Something about D.B. Cooper continues to invite attention, as though the unanswered questions themselves possess a life beyond the original crime. Part of that endurance comes from the strange balance at the heart of the story. Violence never defined the mystery. No dramatic chase ended the night. Instead, the memory that remained belonged to quiet conversations, a folded note, a glass of bourbon, and a man stepping into darkness above forests and rivers. Those images feel almost cinematic, yet they are rooted in documented history. Perhaps that combination explains why the legend spread so naturally. It contains enough facts to feel real and enough uncertainty to encourage imagination. Few stories manage to preserve both qualities for so long. Looking back across the decades, it becomes clear that the mystery changed with time. Early investigators searched for a suspect. Later generations searched for meaning. Some viewed Cooper as a criminal. Others saw him as an unlikely folk figure. Many simply found themselves fascinated by the unanswered ending. Through books, films, and conversations shared across generations, the story evolved into something larger than the hijacking itself. The mystery became a reflection of curiosity, reminding people that history often preserves questions as carefully as it preserves facts. Perhaps that is the most remarkable part of the entire story. The name D.B. Cooper never belonged to the man who purchased the ticket in Portland. It emerged from a mistake in newspaper reporting, yet it became one of the most famous names in American history. The real person behind the alias may never be identified. His fate may remain hidden somewhere between rivers, forests, and forgotten memories. Yet the mystery itself continues to travel forward. Not through evidence alone, but through curiosity passed from one generation to another. And perhaps that is why the legend refuses to disappear. Long after the money, the suspects, and even the investigators fade into history, the image of a man vanishing into the night still lingers quietly, inviting one more question that nobody has managed to answer. Today, D.B. Cooper is no longer just a case file. He is a permanent fixture in American folklore. From the discovery of cash at Bar to the digital debates of a new generation, he has transcended his own crime to become a modern myth. The FBI officially closed the file in 2016, but for the rest of us, the flight never really landed. He remains out there, somewhere between the archives of history and the infinite possibilities of the night. A man who looked at the horizon, stepped into the darkness, and left us with a puzzle that time itself refuses to solve.